We have more now from our special guest, Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, we haven't gotten the chance to talk on air yet about what's happening with our economy, at least from where you sit. You said you were listening earlier when Donald Trump was talking about what happened in Miami and how there's been a real resurgence in property values there, at least. You've got your own ideas about why that's happening.
Well, first of all, there's no doubt it's resurging on what is the condo markets, but the families are still, single-family homes are not doing well in Miami. Many of them are still, a lot of them are still upside down. We're still cycling through foreclosures at the local level there. But a lot of it has to do with capital flight from Latin America. And we've always been the beneficiaries of that. So wealthy businessmen and women from Venezuela, Brazil, et cetera, they invest money in Miami real estate, in Florida real estate. It's not just Miami, it's Orlando, and that's benefited us. And I think it will only continue to benefit us. By the way, one of the great things that we don't spend enough time talking about is how much this country would benefit from economic growth and prosperity in Latin America and in the Western Hemisphere. We are going to be the direct beneficiaries of that, whether it's in Mexico or Colombia because of the free trade agreement. And that's a real opportunity moving forward. We see that first in Miami, but I think that's true for the country.
Well, you've been at the forefront of trying to change immigration laws. You came up with the DREAM Act that you introduced, and you've had some ideas that the president recently adopted, some very similar ideas to what you had been promoting. What do you think of that move?
And I think it's important to bifurcate that issue. On the front end, we have a larger immigration issue in this country that has to do with the fact that on the one hand, we do have rampant illegal immigration, and it has to be dealt with, and people are rightfully concerned about it. On the other hand, we have 21st century immigration needs in this country, and our immigration system is not modern. It does not reflect the economic needs and realities of the 21st century. Related to that issue, but separate, is the plight of young people who were brought to this nation at a very young age, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age, have grown up here their entire lives, are undocumented. Many of these kids don't even know they're undocumented until they graduate high school. Some of these kids are the valedictorians of their high school, and we're going to deport them. And that doesn't make sense either. So I'm trying to figure out an approach to that that's balanced, that doesn't encourage illegal immigration in the future, but recognizes the humanitarian position that these kids are in. And that's what we're trying to balance here, and we're trying to find a solution to do that.
What's wrong with what the president's doing right now?
Well, I think the biggest problem that I have with it is that it ignores the Congress and the Constitution.
But you'd be okay with this plan if it was signed off on?
I think it needs to have more safeguards in place. For example, I think it's important that the kids who are getting this prove that, in fact, they came here before a certain age, have lived here for a certain period of time. I think these are things that are important. I also think it has to be a permanent strategy, not a 2-year deal. This approach requires a long-term solution. And my biggest concern, and I may be proven wrong, but my biggest concern is that by doing this way, the president is undermined and set back the hopes of getting a long-term solution done on this issue. But listen, I hope I'm wrong, because this is an important issue that needs to be solved for the long term.
Mitt Romney does not have similar ideas, or at least he has not brought out similar ideas. His ideas on immigration have basically been very counter to what yours are. How do you match that up?
I don't know. I think Governor Romney's position is that he's in favor of a legal immigration system that works. And I think if we had a legal immigration system that was modern and worked, our illegal immigration problem would be diminished and a lot easier to deal with. And I think that's been his position on it. I think he's also expressed open-mindedness about figuring out an accommodation for certain kids that meet this criteria. Obviously, I think he's interested in seeing the details of what we're working on, and we're still developing that, because while I know the political guys that cover politics want to see us have an immediate solution to the problem that we craft in legislation, this has to be done right, because you're dealing with real people and you're dealing with real law that's going to have a real impact, and it's got to be, you have to have answers to every question that's going to be raised.
Agree with that. Have you spoken with Governor Romney about your immigration plan?
I have on a few months ago, and I know that our staffs have talked to his and tried to keep them up to date on the progress. We're still developing our plan, again, because we're taking input from all the stakeholders. We also need to know, is it going to cost any money? How many people is this going to apply to? The minute I file legislation, people are going to start to pick it apart. And I better have answers to a lot of those questions, or the effort loses credibility. So I think that's the way you make responsible public policy, not just rushing out there with something. And hopefully we'll be able to get there. I hope what the president's done doesn't set us back.
With the president's move over the last week, there are many people who turned back to you and said that this makes you an even more likely VP candidate, because This would answer some of the criticisms to the Romney campaign. Have you heard from the campaign, and are you someone who will be the vice presidential candidate?
Well, as I've said repeatedly, I won't discuss the vice presidential process out of respect for Governor Romney. I know he's going to make a great choice, but on the broader question that you ask, look, I think immigration is a very important issue in the Hispanic community because it's a personal one. It's not a statistic. As I talk about in this book, and I outline that when I talk about immigration, when you talk about immigration in the Hispanic community, you're talking about someone that Hispanic, someone that you love, someone that lives next door to you, someone that your kids go to school with. So you understand the human element of it. And even though you're not in favor of illegal immigration, it breaks your heart to see people go through this. So immigration is important in the Hispanic community. But I think it's a myth to believe that Hispanics wake up in the morning and all they do all day is think about immigration. I mean, they worry about making payroll on Friday. They worry about balancing their family's budget at the end of the month. They worry about their kids' futures. I mean, my book talks about my parents and their obsessive focus on my future and my opportunities. I mean, that is a typical sentiment in the Hispanic community. And I think in order to be successful in American politics and to win and earn the votes of Hispanics, you have to address that. And I think that's how you win these votes, Senator, now and in the future.
They did a poll in Ohio with Portman on the ticket. It didn't really change the dynamics very much. That's a key state. Florida is incredibly key, and your addition of ticket does change the dynamics. It widens a very slim Romney lead in a state that might be as important as Ohio. Plus, you've got, the Hispanic connection as well. But you're only 41, and you haven't been in the Senate that long. How does it all figure out in the political calculus, do you think?
Yeah, for two things. One, I'm not discussing the vice presidential process.
Oh, did you already say that?
I did. But I'll say, look, I don't think there's any, I have no doubt that I'm qualified to serve in the United States Senate, which is the job that I have.
Do you have a doubt that you're qualified to serve as president?
I have no doubt that I'm qualified to serve in the United States Senate. That's the job that I have. And that's the job that I'm doing. And I'm trying to, obviously I get more experience every day. There are issues that are new to me that I've not dealt with when I was a state office holder. On the other hand, some of these things we're dealing with are not necessarily rocket science. I mean, in terms of what our economy and our country needs to move forward. And what it basically needs is a basic sense of governance that's stable and competent. It needs a tax code that's predictable and permanent. It needs regulations that are affordable. I mean, these are not complicated concepts.
Senator, thank you. We appreciate your time. Again, the book is called